Hey everyone! Tonight we're diving deep into a world that's surprisingly familiar, yet fantastically different. The bustling, aromatic, and sometimes perilous coffee houses of 17th century Ottoman Istanbul. Picture your favorite cafe, the gentle murmur of conversations, the hiss of the espresso machine, that comforting smell of roasted beans. Now, transport that vibe about 400 years into the past. Add a dash of political intrigue, a heavy cloud of tobacco smoke, and a set of social rules so intricate you'd probably get yourself into a diplomatic incident just by accepting a cup of coffee the wrong way. Seriously, with the kind of faux pas a modern person might make, you probably wouldn't survive your first week without at least causing a minor scandal, or worse, offending someone whose turban is significantly taller than yours. A bad move, trust me. These weren't just places to get a caffeine fix. They were the internet, the news channel, and the gentleman's club of their day, all rolled into one. So before you get too comfortable, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see how far these stories travel. Now let's turn down the lights, maybe switch on a fan for some gentle white noise, and begin tonight's journey together. You find yourself on a narrow cobbled street in Istanbul, the air thick with the scent of roasting chestnuts from a nearby cart, a hint of the salt Bosphorus breeze, and something else, a rich, dark, and utterly captivating aroma. It's the smell of coffee, a relatively new sensation in this part of the world, but one that has taken the city by storm. You follow your nose, drawn towards a low, timber-framed building from which a gentle hum of voices and the clinking of porcelain can be heard. This, you realize, is a kavahan, a coffee house. As you push open the heavy wooden door, a wave of warmth and sound washes over you. The interior is dimly lit, lanterns casting a soft, flickering glow on the patrons reclining on low benches or settler that line the walls. Intricate carpets in deep reds and blues cover the floors, muffling your footsteps. The air inside is a heady mix. The dominant note is, of course, coffee, freshly ground and brewed, but underneath it, you detect the sweet, pungent aroma of Nargile tobacco, the subtle spice of men's colognes, and the faint, lingering smell of wood smoke from the brazier in the corner that struggles to keep the chill of the evening at bay. It's a far cry from the sterile brightness of your usual coffee spot, isn't it? No one's scrolling on a phone here. Instead, they're engaged in animated conversation, listening to a storyteller, or simply watching the world go by. You hesitate for a moment, feeling like an intruder in a private club, and in a way, you are. These coffee houses, despite their sometimes rough exteriors, are complex social theaters. Mainstream historical accounts tell us that coffee itself was introduced to the Ottoman Empire, likely from Yemen, around the mid-16th century, and its popularity exploded. These coffee houses quickly became central to social and intellectual life, places where men from various walks of life could gather. But various walks of life had its limits and its unspoken rules. You wouldn't just plop down anywhere. Oh no, your status, your profession, even your age might dictate where you could comfortably sit. Imagine the social anxiety of trying to find a spot without accidentally disrespecting a high-ranking janissary or a revered scholar. It's like a 17th century version of picking a table in the high school cafeteria, but with more facial hair and the potential for actual, albeit usually restrained, conflict. The man nearest the door, the caveci or coffee maker, nods towards an empty space on a bench. He's a stout fellow, his sleeves rolled up, his face glistening with a light sweat from the heat of the perpetually brewing coffee pots. You make your way over, carefully stepping around outstretched legs and the occasional discarded slipper. The murmur of conversation around you is a blend of Turkish and Arabic and Persian, a testament to the cosmopolitan nature of the empire's capital. You hear snippets of poetry, discussions about the latest news from the war front, and perhaps a hushed debate about the Sultan's newest decree. Historians still debate the precise level of political discourse tolerated within these establishments. Were they truly hotbeds of sedition, as some authorities feared, or merely places for men to vent and share information? The truth, as always, probably lies somewhere in between. Some coffee houses were known for specific clienteles, merchants in one, scholars in another, soldiers in a third. You'd better hope you've wandered into one that's at least moderately tolerant of newcomers fumbling with the unwritten rulebook. One slightly bizarre detail you might notice is that despite the lively chatter, direct eye contact with strangers is often kept to a minimum initially. It's a subtle dance of acknowledging presence without inviting unwanted interaction too soon. It's all about observing, listening, and waiting for the right moment or the right invitation to join a conversation. Get it wrong, and you might find yourself the subject of some very pointed, very poetic, and very public ridicule. And nobody wants to be the punchline of a 17th century Ottoman joke, especially when it's being delivered by a guy who probably carries a rather ornate dagger. Okay, you're settled, or at least perched on the satyr. The Kavachi catches your eye again, a silent question in his gaze. There's no laminated menu here, no chalkboard with a dozen flavored latte options. Ordering is simple. You want coffee. You give a slight nod, perhaps a subtle gesture with your hand. He understands. This isn't a transaction rushed by the need to get back to the office. It's an experience. He turns back to his domain, a raised platform where several brass or copper sezves, small, long-handled pots, are nestled in hot sand or directly over a charcoal brazier. This method allows for precise temperature control, crucial for the perfect brew. You watch as he expertly spoons finely powdered coffee, ground almost to dust, into a sezve, adds water, and perhaps a lump of sugar if that's the common preference in this particular establishment, though often it was served unsweetened with sweets on the side. The air is already thick with its aroma, but as it heats, a new, more intense wave of that dark, slightly bitter, and incredibly rich scent washes over your senses. It's a smell that promises wakefulness, conversation, and a momentary escape from the mundane. You can almost taste the history in it. After a few minutes of careful heating, just before it froths over, he pours the coffee into a small, delicate porcelain cup, a fincan, often without a handle, sometimes nestled in a metal holder called a zarf to protect your fingers from the heat. The coffee is served black, strong, and unfiltered, leaving a thick sediment at the bottom. Don't even think about asking for a splash of milk or a cinnamon sprinkle. That would be like asking for ketchup on a Michelin-starred chef's masterpiece, a true sign you just don't get it. The coffee is potent, designed to be sipped slowly, savored. This isn't your morning gulp and go fuel, it's a ritual. A mainstream historical fact is that coffee and coffee houses faced considerable opposition initially. Religious conservatives, and even some sultans, viewed them with suspicion, seeing them as dens of iniquity, places where men idled away their time, gambled, and engaged in potentially seditious talk. There were periods when coffee was outright banned, and coffee houses were razed to the ground by order of the authorities. Imagine the uproar if your local Starbucks was suddenly declared illegal. Yet its popularity was so immense that these bans rarely lasted long. The allure of the wine of Islam, as it was sometimes called, was just too strong. As you take your first tentative sip, it's hot, be careful, you notice the hierarchy in how coffee is served. Important or regular patrons might receive their coffee first or with a particular flourish. Newcomers like you are served efficiently, but perhaps with less ceremony. It's all part of the subtle language of the coffee house. You might also notice a rather peculiar detail. Some men, after finishing their coffee, might overturn their cups onto the saucers and wait for the grounds to cool. Later, a friend, or perhaps someone known for their intuitive skills, might read the patterns in the sediment, predicting future events or offering insights. Fortune-telling with coffee grounds, or tasseography, was a common, albeit informal, practice, adding another layer of mystique and social interaction to the coffee house experience. It's a bit like your friend reading your horoscope, but with more direct involvement of your beverage. The conversations around you ebb and flow. Near you, a group of merchants discusses shipping routes and the price of silk from Persia. Further down, an elderly man with a magnificently long white beard is reciting poetry, his voice rising and falling in a melodic cadence, capturing the attention of those around him. These were the epicenters of oral culture. Storytellers, or metas, were star attractions, recounting tales of heroes, epic battles, romantic sagas, and humorous anecdotes. They were the live entertainers, the podcasters of their era, often improvising and interacting with their audience. Sometimes, these performances could last for hours, fueled by endless cups of coffee. Historians still debate the exact influence these storytellers had on public opinion and the dissemination of cultural narratives. Were they merely entertainers, or did they subtly shape political views and social norms through their tales? It's likely they were a bit of both, reinforcing shared values while also introducing new ideas under the guise of ancient stories. You try to look inconspicuous, observing the unwritten rules. You don't interrupt conversations unless invited. You don't stare. You sip your coffee slowly, making it last. Maybe someone will eventually address you, perhaps out of curiosity, or maybe you'll just be left to soak in the atmosphere. It's a delicate balance. Starting an ill-judged conversation could be awkward, even a little risky. Imagine accidentally offending a scholar by questioning his interpretation of a theological point, or worse, making a joke that falls flat with a group of stern-faced janissaries. Probably best to just enjoy your coffee and the ambient sounds for now. The sheer amount of passive smoking you're enduring would probably send your modern-day lungs into shock, but here, the haze of tobacco smoke is just part of the wallpaper, a comforting, acrid fug that everyone seems to take for granted. It's a funny thought, isn't it? We worry so much about clean air now, but for these folks, a lungful of someone else's cherry flavored tobacco was just Tuesday. As the evening deepens and your tiny cup of coffee slowly empties, the initial feeling of being an outsider begins to soften just a little. You're still an observer, of course, but the rhythms of the Kavehane are becoming more familiar. You start to recognize the subtle cues, the way a man taps his empty cup to signal he's ready for another, the respectful hush that falls when a particularly esteemed elder begins to speak, the bursts of laughter that follow a well told joke from the meta in the corner. No one has directly engaged you yet, but the initial, somewhat appraising glances have mostly ceased. You're just another figure in the warm, smoky room, another soul seeking coffee and company. You notice some men are not just talking or listening, they are playing games. Backgammon, or tavla as it's known here, is a common sight, the click-clack of the pieces, a familiar soundtrack in many establishments. Chess, or satrans, is also popular, with intense, silent battles of wits unfolding on intricately carved boards. These aren't just idle pastimes, they are part of the social fabric, ways to bond, to compete good-naturedly, or even to subtly establish intellectual dominance. Mainstream historical understanding acknowledges that coffee houses weren't just for leisure, they were crucial hubs for commerce and news. Merchants would meet to strike deals, guildsmen to discuss trade, and ordinary citizens to catch up on the latest gossip or official announcements, often read aloud by literate patrons. It was the original LinkedIn, but with more comfortable seating and better coffee. You might spot a rather curious item in a quiet corner. A communal water pipe, a nargile with multiple hoses, though more often they are individual. Sharing a nargile was a sign of camaraderie, but even then, there was etiquette involved. Which mouthpiece to use, how to pass the hose. Get that wrong, and you might inadvertently commit a social blunder. One such bizarre detail, often overlooked, is the specific type of charcoal used for the nargile, often made from specific woods, like orange or lemon, believed to impart a cleaner, more flavorful smoke. The connoisseurs were very particular. The air remains thick with conversation. You hear whispers about new taxes, rumors about the Grand Vizier's health, and assessments of the latest sermons from the city's prominent mosques. How much of this was truly unmonitored? Historians still debate the effectiveness of the Ottoman state in controlling the narratives and activities within these thousands of coffee houses. Spies and informants, known as hafiye, were undoubtedly present, attempting to gauge public mood and report on any seditious talk. But in a city so vast, and with coffee houses so numerous and deeply embedded in the social life, complete surveillance was likely an impossible task. For now, you feel a sense of relative anonymity, a fly on the wall of a vibrant, complex world. The first cup of coffee has settled your nerves and sharpened your senses. You're beginning to feel the pull of this place, the subtle addiction, not just to the caffeine, but to the atmosphere of shared experience. You decide you might just stay for another cup. The night is still young, and the stories are just beginning to unfold. As you signal to the kahveti for another coffee, a subtle lift of your empty finken, a knowing glance, you feel a little more a part of the tapestry of the room. The second cup always tastes better, doesn't it? Less about the initial jolt, more about savoring the moment. You're no longer just a passive observer, You're a participant, albeit a quiet one, in this nightly ritual. The storyteller in the corner has moved on from epic poems to a more humorous, satirical tale, and ripples of knowing laughter spread through the room. It's a shared amusement, a collective understanding that transcends the individual conversations. You notice a group near the center of the room engaged in a particularly animated discussion. Their voices rise and fall, punctuated by emphatic gestures, yet it never seems to spill over into genuine aggression. It's a debate, conducted with a certain flair and adherence to unspoken rules. One man, distinguished by his green turban, signaling he is a Haji, one who has completed the pilgrimage to Mecca, is making a point about a recent interpretation of a classical text. Another, younger, with the keen eyes of a student, respectfully listens, then offers a counter-argument, quoting another scholar. This is the intellectual heart of the coffee house. Indeed, a widely accepted historical fact is that these kahvehaneler were often referred to as mekteb-i-irfan, or schools of knowledge, sometimes even penny universities in a later Western parallel. For the price of a cup of coffee, one could gain access to learning, news, and vigorous intellectual exchange that might otherwise be confined to more formal, less accessible institutions. Here, literacy wasn't always a prerequisite to participate in the world of ideas. Listening and discourse were key. You find your gaze drawn to an older gentleman sitting alone, meticulously cleaning the stem of his nargile with a feather. He has an air of quiet authority, and people seem to greet him with particular deference as they pass. Perhaps he's a retired judge, a well-regarded poet, or simply a neighborhood elder whose wisdom is valued. The social strata here are complex. While coffee houses were more egalitarian than many other public spaces in the Ottoman world, allowing men from different backgrounds to mix, the extent of true social leveling is something historians still actively discuss. Did a commoner truly feel free to challenge a high-ranking official or a renowned scholar without consequence? Or were the hierarchies merely softened, the interactions guided by a nuanced understanding of status and respect that might be invisible to an outsider like you? It's likely that while a broader range of society could be present, the traditional respect for age, learning, and position still heavily influenced the dynamics. You certainly wouldn't just interrupt the man with the green turban unless you really knew your stuff. A slightly bizarre detail you might observe is the subtle language of objects. If a man placed his slippers neatly together pointing away from the gathering, it might indicate he was preparing to leave soon. If he tapped his water pipe in a certain way, it could be a signal to the attendant. Even the way one accepted or declined a shared sweetmeat offered by a companion had its own etiquette, a silent conversation of manners. Imagine the social pressure. It's like a never-ending, highly nuanced dinner party, but instead of worrying about which fork to use, you're worried about the angle of your slippers. One wrong move and you're the barbarian who doesn't know how to point his shoes. Suddenly, the man next to you, who had been silently observing the room, much like yourself, leans over slightly. He's of middling years, plainly dressed, perhaps a craftsman or a shopkeeper. "First time at Ibrahim's Cave?" he asks, his voice low and friendly. His Turkish is clear, relatively unadorned. This is it, an opening, a chance to move from observer to participant. Your heart might beat a little faster. What do you say? How do you respond in a way that is polite, open, but not overly eager? The intricate dance continues, even in the simplest of interactions. You might just offer a polite affirmative, a slight smile. He might then comment on the storyteller or the quality of the coffee, testing the waters, gauging your demeanor. This is how connections are made, slowly, carefully, one cup of coffee at a time. And you realize, as you murmur a simple reply, that you're not just drinking coffee anymore. You're drinking in a whole culture, a whole way of being. The second cup is definitely working its magic. Yes, it is, you reply to the man, keeping your voice modest. The coffee is very good. It's a simple, safe opening. He nods, a slight smile playing on his lips. Ibrahim makes a fine brew, and his ear is always open, which is just as important, wouldn't you say? He gestures subtly with his chin towards the kahvechi, who seems to be absorbing every conversation in the room without ever appearing to listen. This is a key insight. The coffee house owner wasn't just a purveyor of beverages. He was often a conduit of information, a discreet observer, and sometimes a community confidant. Your neighbor introduces himself as Yusuf, a maker of fine leather slippers, his shop just a few streets away. He asks, not unkindly, what brings a traveler like yourself to this particular corner of the city? As you offer a vague but polite answer, perhaps you're a merchant exploring new markets, or a scholar interested in the city's famous libraries. You realize this is how information begins to flow. Mainstream historical accounts confirm that coffee houses were vital nexuses for news dissemination. In an era before widespread literacy or printed newspapers, information traveled orally. Official decrees would be read aloud, news from distant provinces would be shared by travelers, and merchants would exchange the latest on trade conditions and political stability in other regions. If you wanted to know what was really happening in the city, beyond the sanitized pronouncements from the palace, the coffee house was where you'd go. It was the grapevine, the rumor mill, and the bulletin board, all in one smoky, caffeinated package. Yusuf, it turns in, is a regular. He knows many of the patrons by name, their professions, their usual topics of conversation. He points out a quiet man in the corner, a calligrapher renowned for his beautiful script, who sometimes pens letters for those who cannot write. He gestures towards another, more boisterous group, identifying them as off-duty janissaries, their conversation peppered with military slang and complaints about their pay, a timeless soldierly tradition, it seems. They talk big, Yusuf says with a wry smile, but most are good men. Just don't get into an argument with them about who is the bravest. A piece of friendly advice, delivered with a knowing look. You make a mental note. Avoid discussions of bravery with heavily armed soldiers. Seems like a solid life tip across any century. He then leans in a little closer, his voice dropping. One must be careful, of course, he murmurs. Not all ears are friendly, and words, like spilt coffee, cannot easily be taken back. This is the ever-present undercurrent. While coffee houses were havens for relatively free expression, that freedom had its limits, and the shadow of authority was never far away. A careless comment, a criticism voiced too loudly or to the wrong person, could have serious consequences. Imprisonment, exile, or worse, were not unheard of fates for those deemed to be stirring up trouble or speaking against the Sultan or the state. Imagine your Twitter feed But instead of getting ratioed for a bad take, you get a one-way trip to a very unpleasant fortress. This brings to mind a rather bizarre yet telling detail about the era: the figure of the Bozacci. Boza was another popular, mildly fermented drink, and its sellers often roamed the streets at night, their distinctive cries echoing in the darkness. Some of these Boza sellers, and indeed other street vendors, were rumored to be informants for the authorities, their seemingly innocuous presence a way to gather street-level intelligence. It adds a layer of paranoia, doesn't it? Was the man selling roasted chestnuts outside the coffee house also making mental notes of who came and went? Perhaps. Yusuf then recounts a recent incident where a merchant, after a few too many cups of strong coffee, and perhaps feeling a bit too bold, had loudly criticized a new tax. Within days, the merchant's shop was visited by officials, and he faced an uncomfortable audit that lasted weeks. He meant no real harm, Yusuf sighs, but the walls have ears, even here. This leads to an ongoing debate among historians. Did coffee houses genuinely foster political dissent and contribute to organized opposition, or were they more of a safety valve, allowing people to vent their frustrations in a relatively contained environment, thus preventing more serious unrest? Some scholars argue that by providing a space for grievances to be aired, coffee houses actually helped maintain social stability, while others believe they were crucial breeding grounds for new ideas and challenges to authority. The truth is likely complex, varying from one coffee house to another, from one decade to the next. The conversation with Yusuf is enlightening. He doesn't press you for information, but seems content to share his observations about the little world within the Kahvahani. He speaks of the changing seasons, the quality of the latest tobacco shipment, the health of the Sultan, always a topic of hushed speculation, and the upcoming religious festivals. It's a microcosm of the city's concerns, its hopes, and its anxieties. You learn more about the practicalities of life in 17th century Istanbul from this slipper maker in an hour than you might from a dry historical tome in a week. He doesn't just tell you facts, he gives you the texture, the flavor of the time, and as you listen, you realize that the true art of the coffee house isn't just in the brewing of the coffee, but in the brewing of conversation, of community, of shared humanity in a world that, despite its exotic trappings, faced many of the same human concerns as your own. You just have to hope you don't say the 17th century equivalent of this could have been an email during a particularly passionate poetic recital. That probably wouldn't go over well. As the night wears on, the atmosphere inside Ibrahim's kahvahan subtly shifts. Some of the earlier patrons, those with families and early morning duties, have paid their dues. A few small coins left discreetly on the sedir or handed to Ibrahim and slipped out into the cool night air. Their places are quickly taken by others, or the remaining patrons spread out a little, a sigh of collective relaxation settling over the room. The nargile smoke seems to hang a bit thicker, sweeter, and the conversations, while still lively, take on a more intimate, perhaps more philosophical tone. You notice that Yusuf, your companionable slipper maker, orders a small plate of sweet pastries, baklava perhaps, or a piece of lokum, Turkish delight, to accompany his third coffee. The sugar, he explains with a smile, helps to balance the humors late at night. Whether that's 17th century medical advice or just a good excuse for a treat, You're not sure, but it sounds plausible enough. The storyteller, who had earlier captivated the room with epic tales and humorous anecdotes, has now finished his set. For a while, the dominant sounds are the murmur of conversations, the clinking of cups, and the gentle bubbling of nargils. Then, from a quieter corner, someone produces a saz, a long-necked lute. He doesn't make a grand announcement, just begins to play, soft, melancholic melodies at first, then gradually more intricate and lively tunes. A few heads turn, conversations pause, then resume at a lower volume, the music weaving itself into the existing soundscape. This is another facet of coffeehouse life, informal, spontaneous entertainment. It wasn't always a formal performance. Sometimes it was just a patron sharing his talent. Mainstream historical understanding tells us that coffee houses catered to a wide array of tastes and functions. While some were known for highbrow intellectual or religious discussions, others were famous for their musicians, poets, puppeteers. Karagöz and Hatzivat shadow puppet shows were incredibly popular, or even displays of exotic animals by traveling entertainers. You could choose your coffee house based on your mood or your preferred form of diversion. You notice a group of men who arrived later, dressed in somewhat more elaborate clothing, their turbans indicating a scholarly or perhaps even a minor bureaucratic leaning. They don't mix much with the janissaries or the merchants, but form their own distinct cluster, their conversation more formal, filled with classical Arabic and Persian phrases. They pull out books, small, leather-bound volumes, and begin what appears to be a close reading and discussion of a text. This illustrates the diversity within the coffeehouse clientele. It wasn't a homogeneous blob. Different professions, different social circles, different intellectual traditions often formed their own subgroups within the larger space, coexisting, sometimes interacting, but often maintaining a degree of separation. It was a shared space, but not always an integrated one. Think of it as different online forums all existing in the same physical room, occasionally cross-posting. One rather bizarre belief that sometimes surfaced around coffee consumption, particularly among its detractors, was that excessive coffee drinking could lead to a darkening of the soul, or even impotence, a bit of 17th century fake news, perhaps, used to discourage its use. Of course, its proponents lauded it for sharpening the mind and aiding wakefulness, especially for religious scholars needing to study late into the night, or for craftsmen requiring concentration. For every coffee will ruin your life argument, there was a coffee will make you a genius counterpoint. The debate was as rich as the brew itself. The presence of the scholarly group, deeply engrossed in their texts, brings up a point often debated by historians. Were coffee houses truly secular spaces, or did religious discourse and piety still hold significant sway? While they were certainly more open and less formally religious than, say, a mosque or a madris, theological school, religion was an integral part of Ottoman life. Discussions of religious law, ethics, and theology were common, as you're witnessing. Many coffee houses were located near mosques, and patrons would come and go for prayers. So rather than purely secular, they were perhaps spaces where the sacred and the profane, the worldly and the religious, could comfortably intermingle and be discussed with a degree of freedom not found elsewhere. It wasn't about excluding religion, but about integrating it into the broader fabric of daily life and intellectual curiosity. Yusuf notices your interest in the scholarly group. They are discussing the finer points of Rumi's poetry, he whispers, or perhaps debating the latest commentary from Al-Azhar in Cairo. Their words are too rich for a simple slipper maker like me, but it is good to know such learning exists, to hear the echoes of it. There's no resentment in his tone, only a kind of civic pride in the intellectual vibrancy of his city. He then tells you a joke, a common one, about a hoka, a religious teacher, who gets into an absurd argument in a coffee house, a light-hearted jab that nonetheless shows the familiar presence of religious figures in these settings. The ability to joke about such figures, even mildly, suggests a certain level of comfort and familiarity, a departure from the strict reverence expected in more formal religious contexts. The night is far from over, and you sense that the coffee house still has many more of its secrets and its stories to reveal as the city outside sleeps. The gentle strumming of the saz continues, a soothing counterpoint to the earnest debates and quiet confidences shared over cooling cups of coffee. The music from the saz player becomes a gentle, almost hypnotic backdrop to the scene. You're on your third coffee now, a smaller cup this time, the rich, dark liquid of familiar comfort. Yusuf has fallen into a companionable silence, puffing thoughtfully on his own nargile, its cherry-scented smoke a fragrant cloud around him. You notice how, for many here, the Kavahan seems to be a refuge, an escape from the cramped living quarters of a densely populated city, or perhaps from the demands of family or the tedium of work. It's a third place, distinct from home and work, where a man could simply be, surrounded by the anonymous companionship of others. Here, identities could be a little more fluid, worries could be temporarily set aside, all under the mellowing influence of caffeine and conversation. But it's not all tranquil philosophizing and poetic recitations. You've seen a few glares exchanged, a conversation that got a little too heated before one of the participants abruptly stood up and walked out, presumably to cool off. The coffee house, like any public gathering spot, has its potential for friction. While serious violence was rare and quickly suppressed, Ibrahim, the kahvechi, has a commanding presence and you suspect he's seen it all. Disagreements were inevitable. Social norms were often enforced not by an external authority, but from within the community of patrons itself. A man who consistently behaved boorishly, who didn't respect the unwritten rules of debate, or who failed to show proper deference, would soon find himself isolated, his conversation ignored, his presence unwelcome. It was a subtle but effective form of social control, one interesting, almost bizarre custom for settling very minor disputes or wagers. You learn from a whispered aside by Yusuf might involve the loser paying for the next round of coffee for the other party, or even for a small group. It was a way to resolve things with a degree of honor and without lingering resentment, turning a potential conflict into a moment of shared, if slightly begrudging, hospitality. Think of it as a 17th century version of loser buys pizza, but with more at stake for your social standing. You start to wonder about the economics of it all. The coffee itself is not expensive, just a few akçe per cup, but with patrons lingering for hours, how does Ibrahim make a living? A mainstream historical fact is that the Ottoman authorities did attempt to regulate coffee prices, and licenses were required to operate a kavahain. These regulations were intended to prevent price gouging and to maintain some control over the proliferation of these establishments. Ibrahim likely relies on volume, a steady stream of customers, and perhaps also sells tobacco, sweets, and occasionally even simple food items. The nargile, too, is a source of income. Patrons pay for the tobacco and the use of the pipe. It's a precarious business, perhaps, dependent on reputation, location, and the fickle tastes of the public. Historians still debate the overall economic impact of coffee houses on Ottoman society. Some contemporary critics lamented them as dens of idleness, arguing that men were wasting valuable work time and money. They saw it as a drain on productivity, much like some bosses today might view excessive social media breaks. Others, however, argue that coffee houses indirectly stimulated commerce by serving as meeting places for merchants, facilitating business deals, and acting as centers for information that could be vital for trade. Plus, they created employment for coffee makers, attendants, storytellers, musicians, and the whole supply chain of coffee, tobacco, and sugar. It's the classic, is this a distraction or a networking opportunity? Argument, playing out centuries ago. As the hour grows even later, approaching midnight, the crowd thins a little more, but a dedicated core remains. The scholarly group is still deep in their texts, their voices now low and intense. The Janissaries are recounting increasingly improbable tales of daring, their laughter booming. Then the door creaks open, and a figure enters who causes a subtle shift in the room's atmosphere. He's not dressed extravagantly, but he carries himself with an air of quiet menace. His eyes sweep the room, lingering for a moment on the Janissaries, then on the scholars, and finally, briefly, on you and Yusuf. Conversations don't stop, but their volume dips, just for a second. Ibrahim, the Kavechi, gives a curt, almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement. Yusuf subtly shifts his position, ever so slightly, creating a little more space between himself and the newcomer. This man, you sense, is not here for the poetry. His arrival feels like a punctuation mark, a sign that the easy, flowing narrative of the evening might be about to take a different turn. The newcomer doesn't order coffee. He doesn't take a seat on the offered cushions. Instead, he remains standing near the doorway, his arms crossed, his gaze slowly panning across the remaining patrons. He's like a stone dropped into a calm pool, the ripples of his presence spreading outwards, disturbing the easy camaraderie that had settled in the room. Yusuf, beside you, has gone very still. His nargile lies dormant, the embers in its bowl dimming. You can feel a tension coiling in the air, a stark contrast to the relaxed, almost sleepy vibe of moments before. Even the saz player seems to have fumbled a note, his melody faltering slightly before he continues, though now with a more subdued air. He is a Subash's man, Yusuf murmurs to you, his voice barely audible above the now more muted conversations. A Subasha was a kind of local police chief or enforcer for the city authorities. His men were often tasked with maintaining order, investigating disturbances, and significantly keeping an eye on places like coffee houses, which were, as you've gathered, often viewed with a degree of suspicion by the powers that be. This man isn't here for a friendly chat or a game of tavla. His presence is a clear signal, a reminder of the state's watchful eye. The group of Janissaries, who had been loud and boisterous, visibly temper their volume. One of them, who had been in the middle of a particularly boastful anecdote, trails off, clears his throat, and takes a long sip of his coffee. The scholars, too, seem to draw in on themselves, their discussion of Rumi's poetry suddenly less animated. It's a fascinating, if unsettling, display of how quickly the atmosphere of relative freedom could be curtailed by just a hint of official scrutiny. This brings to mind a stark historical fact. Coffee houses were periodically subjected to crackdowns. If they were perceived to be fostering too much dissent, becoming too rowdy, or simply falling out of favor with the current authorities, they could be forcibly closed, sometimes with their owners imprisoned or fined. It was a precarious existence, always balancing the desire to provide a welcoming space with the need to avoid attracting the wrong kind of attention. You notice Ibrahim, the Kahvechi, engage in a subtle, almost imperceptible exchange with the newcomer. A slight flick of his eyes towards a particular corner, a barely noticeable shake of his head. It's a silent language, likely conveying that all is calm, nothing untoward is occurring. This kind of nonverbal communication was crucial. A bizarre but practical detail in such establishments was the development of subtle codes or signals. For instance, the way a coffee cup was placed, or a specific phrase used by the kavesi, could silently warn regular patrons of danger, such as the presence of an informant or an impending raid. It was a system born of necessity, a way to navigate the often treacherous currents of urban life. The Subash's man remains for what feels like an eternity, though it's probably only 10 or 15 minutes. He doesn't speak, doesn't interact, he just watches. It's a power play, a demonstration of authority. The tension is palpable. You find yourself holding your breath, wondering if some unfortunate soul will make a careless remark, or if a hidden tension will finally snap. Would he intervene in a theological debate if it got too heated? Would he question the loyalty implied by a soldier's grumble? This very real threat of surveillance and intervention fuels an ongoing academic debate. To what extent were coffee houses genuinely involved in plotting conspiracies or launching organized political movements? While popular imagination and some historical accounts paint them as hotbeds of sedition where rebellions were hatched over cups of coffee, other scholars are more skeptical. They argue that while dissent was certainly voiced, the practicalities of organizing genuine conspiracies in such public, easily infiltrated spaces were limited. Perhaps they were more about gauging public sentiment and spreading ideas than about masterminding coups. Yet the fear of such activities was real enough for the authorities to maintain their watch. Finally, as silently as he arrived, the Subash's man turns and leaves. The collective exhalation in the room is almost audible. It's as if a heavy blanket has been lifted. Conversations slowly regain their previous volume, shoulders visibly relax, and Yusuf even reaches for his nargle again, coaxing the embers back to life. He comes by sometimes, Yusuf says, his voice still a little tight, just to remind us that the night has many eyes. The interruption, though brief, has undeniably changed the mood. The carefree abandon of the earlier hours feels harder to recapture. The coffee house, for all its warmth and camaraderie, is also a stage where the larger dramas of power and control are played out in subtle, sometimes chilling ways. It makes you appreciate the courage of those who dared to speak their minds, however cautiously, in such an environment. You wouldn't want to be the guy whose joke about the Sultan's funny hat was the one thing the plainclothes policeman remembered from his visit. The visit from the Subash's man has undeniably cast a long shadow, but the resilient spirit of the Kavahane begins to reassert itself. After all, these establishments have weathered far worse: outright bans, raids, plagues, and the ever-shifting political tides of a vast empire. A little intimidation is perhaps just another flavor in the rich brew of daily life. Yusuf, now more relaxed, shares a quiet story about a famous meta who once cleverly satirized a pompous local official through a seemingly innocent animal fable right under the official's nose, much to the hidden delight of the other patrons. It's a testament to the subtle ways wit and courage could still find expression. As the night deepens further, inching towards the first hint of dawn that is still hours away, but nonetheless anticipated, the coffee house enters its final phase. Only the most dedicated night owls remain, a few of the scholars still hunched over their texts, their lamps burning low, a couple of solitary figures nursing their last coffees, lost in thought, and you and Yusuf, your conversation now a gentle, sporadic murmur. The energy of the place has changed from the boisterous exchanges of early evening to a more contemplative, almost somnolent calm. It feels like the city itself is holding its breath. You reflect on what you've witnessed. This simple room, filled with smoke and the scent of coffee, is so much more than just a place to drink. It's a living archive of stories, a crucible for ideas, a sanctuary for community, and a stage for the quiet dramas of everyday life. It makes you wonder about the legacy of these places. Mainstream historical understanding suggests that while the traditional Ottoman Kavahain, in this specific 17th century form, eventually evolved or declined with modernization and the rise of different forms of social spaces in later centuries, their impact was profound. They helped to democratize access to information and intellectual discourse, fostered a vibrant oral culture, and arguably laid some of the groundwork for a more engaged public sphere. A rather charming, if somewhat marginal detail you might learn is about the closing ritual of some cavevitsies. Before shuttering for the night, some would leave a small offering, perhaps a tiny cup of coffee or a piece of sugar, for the sinler, jinn, or spirits believed to inhabit all old buildings, to keep them sweet and ensure the prosperity and peace of the establishment. It's a little touch of folklore, a nod to the unseen world, blending seamlessly with the very real, very human interactions that defined the space. It makes you think, even in this rational age, that perhaps every beloved local spot has its own protective spirit, nurtured by the loyalty of its patrons. The broader impact of these Ottoman coffee houses on global culture is a topic historians continue to explore and debate. Did they directly influence the coffee houses that later sprang up in Europe, becoming centers of the Enlightenment and commerce there? While the exact pathways of influence are complex and contested, the Ottoman Empire was certainly a key conduit through which coffee and the culture surrounding it spread westward. The very idea of a public space dedicated to conversation, news, and intellectual exchange over coffee undoubtedly resonated across cultures, even if it adapted to different social norms. Were they the true ancestors of your favorite modern cafe? Perhaps in spirit, if not in direct lineage. Yusuf finally stifles a yawn. The night is almost spent, my friend, he says, a note of gentle finality in his voice. Even the most dedicated coffee drinker must eventually seek his pillow. He rises slowly, offering you a polite nod. May your rest be peaceful and your journeys safe. His departure feels like a natural end to your immersive experience. The Kavichi, Ibrahim, is now quietly cleaning his pots, the rhythmic clink of metal on metal, a soothing sound. Only a handful of patrons remain, each seemingly lost in their own world, the shared energy of the coffee house now diffused into individual introspection. The air is still warm, still fragrant with coffee and old stories, but it's a sleepy warmth now, a comforting endnote to a long and fascinating night. You feel a sense of gratitude for this accidental glimpse into a world so different, yet so fundamentally human. You realize that if you tried to explain your smartphone to Yusuf, he'd probably think you were the one telling fantastical tales. And as you prepare to step out into the pre-dawn stillness of Istanbul, you carry with you more than just the lingering taste of strong Turkish coffee. You carry the echoes of poetry, the fervor of debate, the warmth of unexpected companionship, and the quiet dignity of a world that knew how to find community and meaning in the simple act of sharing a cup. Relaxation, and now, just let the sounds of that old coffee house begin to fade. Let the image of the flickering lanterns grow soft, the rich aroma of coffee and spice gently dissipate on the cool night air. Feel the imaginary cobblestones under your feet become indistinct as you drift away from that bustling ancient city. The discussions, the laughter, the whispered secrets, they all melt into a gentle, soothing hum, like the distant murmur of the sea. There are no more debates to follow, no more social codes to decipher, just the quiet of this present moment, here, in your own comfortable space. Let your breathing deepen, slowly and easily. Inhale calm, exhale any lingering tension. Feel the weight of your body supported, secure. The stories of the past are now just soft echoes, lulling you towards rest. Each breath out is a gentle release, carrying you further away from the complexities of the day, further into a state of peaceful repose. The intricate details of the coffee house, the faces of its patrons, the rich tapestries, and the scent of tobacco, let them all become a soft, warm blur. There's nothing more to analyze, nothing more to understand, only the feeling of gentle descent into stillness. Your mind can be as quiet as the empty Kavaheim just before dawn, peaceful and undisturbed. Allow any remaining thoughts to simply drift by, like clouds in a calm night sky, acknowledging them without holding on to them. You are safe, you are comfortable, and you are ready for deep, restorative sleep. The journey is over for tonight. Hey everyone, tonight we are flushing away our modern worries and diving deep into a surprisingly clean past. We're heading back over 4,000 years, not to a land of primitive squalor as you might expect, but to the remarkably orderly and impressively hygienic cities of the Indus Valley civilization. Think about your daily routine, the convenience of a running tap, a flushing toilet, the unseen network of pipes that whisk away waste. Now imagine that level of civic planning existing in 2500 BCE. It's kind of mind-boggling. Honestly, most of us, with our delicate modern sensibilities and reliance on little scented soaps, probably wouldn't survive a week in many other ancient civilizations without yearning for a good shower. But the Indus people, they might have just nodded sympathetically and pointed you towards the nearest public bath or impressively designed drain. They were truly ahead of their time, the unsung heroes of ancient urban plumbing. So before you get too comfortable, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, I'd love to see where you're joining from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's always a treat to see our little history community stretch across the globe. Now let's turn down the lights, maybe switch on a fan for some gentle white noise, and begin tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing on a wide, remarkably straight street. The air is warm, dry, with an earthy scent of baked brick and distant river water. This isn't a chaotic jumble of huts and pathways. This is a city meticulously planned. You're in what archaeologists would later call Mohenjo-Daro, or perhaps Harappa, one of the great urban centers of the Indus Valley civilization, flourishing in what is now Pakistan and northwest India. The buildings lining the street are constructed from standardized kiln-fired bricks, a testament to their advanced mass production techniques. There's a sense of order here, a quiet hum of an organized society that feels almost modern. As you begin to walk, your attention is drawn not just to the regularity of the buildings, but to what's running alongside and beneath the street. You see covered channels built with those same sturdy bricks, disappearing into the foundations of houses and leading towards larger arterial drains. This, you realize, is the beginning of their sanitation story. It's not glamorous, perhaps, not like discovering a pharaoh's tomb filled with gold, but it's profoundly human and incredibly sophisticated for its era. Mainstream historical fact: the Indus Valley civilization is renowned for having some of the world's earliest and most efficient urban sanitation systems. Nearly every house in these major cities had access to water and drainage facilities, including what appear to be dedicated bathing areas, and yes, even toilets. We're talking private bathrooms, folks, over 4 millennia ago. Your average medieval European castle couldn't boast that kind of convenience. You peer into an opening where a section of a smaller drain leads from a house. It's lined with smooth, carefully fitted bricks, angled precisely to ensure a good flow. The engineering is subtle but effective. You can almost hear the ghostly gurgle of water that once flowed here, carrying away the waste of daily life. Imagine the civic cooperation required. This wasn't just one person's bright idea. It was a community-wide effort, a shared understanding of hygiene and public health that is simply astounding. It makes you wonder how they organized the garbage collection, probably more efficiently than my current municipal service, if their drains are anything to go by. You notice something rather particular about the drains. At intervals, there are small, brick-lined sumps or catch pits built into the system. These would have allowed solid waste to settle, so it could be periodically cleaned out, preventing the main channels from clogging. It's such a simple, yet brilliant, piece of engineering, a detail that speaks volumes about their understanding of waste management. It's a bit like finding out your ancient ancestors not only invented the wheel, but also invented the concept of regularly scheduled maintenance for it. Historians still debate the exact nature of the Indus Valley government or administrative system that managed to plan and maintain such extensive public works across numerous cities? Was it a centralized empire, a collection of independent city-states with shared cultural norms, or something else entirely? The lack of monumental palaces or overtly royal tombs, common in other ancient civilizations, makes their power structure a fascinating puzzle. A bizarre, or at least highly specialized detail you might observe if you could peek into the archaeological record is the use of specific types of pottery and even terracotta pipes for some of the plumbing fixtures. Some houses had vertical pipes built into the walls, suggesting multi-story dwellings with drainage from upper floors, ancient downspouts essentially. They even had manhole covers made of brick or stone, allowing access to the covered drains for cleaning. It's the kind of thoughtful infrastructure that many cities wouldn't see again for thousands of years. You can almost picture an Indus Valley plumber, tools in hand, grumbling about a blocked drain. Some things are timeless, perhaps. The level of standardization in their bricks and urban layout is one thing, but applying that to sanitation is another level of impressive. You continue your walk, the sun climbing higher, casting sharper shadows down the arrow straight streets. The sheer organization is still striking. No winding alleyways here, no haphazard sprawl. It's a grid, a planner's dream, and as you pay more attention to the individual dwellings, you start to notice another key component of their sanitation and water system: wells. Many houses, especially the larger ones, seem to have their own private wells, circular shafts lined with those same durable, wedge-shaped baked bricks dug deep into the earth to tap the clean groundwater. Imagine the convenience: fresh water right in your own courtyard. This is a mainstream historical fact that archaeologists have confirmed. The Indus cities, particularly Mohenjo-Daro, were peppered with an astonishing number of private and public wells, far more per capita than contemporary civilizations like Egypt or Mesopotamia. Access to clean water was clearly a high priority, not just a luxury for the elite. You approach what appears to be a public well at a street intersection, its brick parapet worn smooth by centuries of use, or, in your imagined journey, by the hands of countless city dwellers. You can almost hear the creak of ropes, the splash of water containers being lowered and raised. The well shafts are remarkably well constructed, designed to prevent collapse and contamination. It makes you think about the modern struggle in many parts of the world to provide universal access to clean water, and here, 4.5 millennia ago, was a society that had seemingly cracked a significant part of that code, at least within its urban centers. No fumbling with a shared, muddy waterhole for these folks. They had engineered solutions. It's probably for the best you're not actually drinking this ancient water, though. Even the best ancient wells probably had a few surprises modern stomachs aren't prepared for. Moving beyond the wells, you start to investigate the bathing facilities. Inside the ruins of many houses, archaeologists have identified dedicated bathing platforms. These are typically raised brick structures, often with a carefully sloped, waterproofed floor made of tightly fitted bricks, or sometimes even a form of plaster, leading to a drain that connects to the street-wide system. Picture this: a special room or area in your house just for washing. It's another layer of their commitment to cleanliness. These weren't just quick splashes. The construction suggests a more thorough, deliberate approach to personal hygiene. And then, of course, there's the jewel in Mohenjo-Daro's sanitation crown, the structure known as the Great Bath. You find yourself drawn towards a larger complex in what archaeologists call the Citadel area, a raised mound containing public buildings. As you enter the vast courtyard, you see it, an impressive, sunken rectangular pool, about 12 meters long, 7 meters wide, and 2.4 meters deep. It's built with incredible precision from fine brickwork lined with bitumen, natural tar, to make it waterproof. Steps lead down into the pool from either end. Surrounding it are the remains of colonnades and small rooms. It's an architectural marvel, and its existence speaks volumes. What exactly was the Great Bath used for? This is a topic of considerable academic debate. Was it purely for public hygiene, a giant swimming pool for the citizens? Or, as many scholars believe, was it primarily for ritual purification, connected to religious ceremonies? The careful construction, its prominent location, and the presence of what might be changing rooms or private cubicles around it suggest it held significant cultural importance. Perhaps it was both, a place where spiritual cleanliness and physical cleanliness were intertwined. Imagine a community center, but instead of a basketball court, there's this magnificent, sacred pool. One can only guess at the rituals and social interactions that took place here. A slightly more bizarre, or at least intriguing detail concerning the Great Bath is the sophisticated water supply and drainage system connected specifically to it. It was filled with water from a nearby well, and it had a large outlet drain, corbelled and high enough for a person to walk through, which would have allowed for periodic emptying and cleaning. The engineering involved in keeping such a large body of water clean and functional is again incredibly advanced. They weren't just filling a big hole with water, they were managing it. You could imagine the pool guy of Mohenjo-Daro being a very important and probably slightly stressed individual. The sheer effort invested in this single structure underscores how vital water and perhaps ritual bathing was to the Indus people. The level of detail, from the tight brickwork to the waterproofing, tells a story of a people who valued precision and durability in their public works, especially those connected to something as fundamental as water. Your exploration of the Indus city's water management continues, and you inevitably turn your attention to perhaps the most personal aspect of sanitation, toilets, and yes, they had them. It's a confirmed historical fact that many Indus Valley dwellings, particularly in cities like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, were equipped with latrines. These weren't just holes in the ground. Often, they were brick commodes, sometimes with wooden seats, long since decayed, of course, connected by chutes or pipes directly to the covered street drains or to individual soak pits. Imagine the dignity of a private, relatively clean place to attend to nature's calls, thousands of years before such amenities became common in many other parts of the world. It truly sets them apart. You might try to picture the scene. No soft toilet paper, of course. That's a much later invention. Water, and perhaps sponges or other natural materials, would have been used for cleaning. One slightly more peculiar detail that archaeologists have noted is the design of some of these latrine chutes. They were often steeply sloped and sometimes L-shaped, presumably to help with flushing waste away more effectively and to reduce odors from backing up into the house. It's a small thing, but it shows a thoughtful approach to a universal human need. They weren't just content with getting waste out of sight, they were engineering better ways to do it. The very existence of such widespread, sophisticated systems implies a strong sense of civic responsibility and perhaps even a rudimentary understanding of public health. Historians still debate whether the Indus people had an early form of germ theory. Did they connect sanitation with disease prevention in a scientific way? Or were their efforts primarily focused on aesthetics, managing unpleasant smells, and maintaining a sense of ritual purity? It's hard to say definitively without deciphered texts. However, the sheer scale and engineering prowess suggest a deep-seated cultural value placed on cleanliness and order, whatever the underlying rationale. It makes you wonder if they had public service announcements. Friends, don't let friends clog the municipal drains. As you stand amidst these ancient, sun-baked bricks, you get a profound sense that this society, for all its mysteries, had figured out some fundamental truths about urban living. Their well-planned streets, their standardized building materials, and especially their intricate water and waste management systems, all point to a civilization that valued order, cooperation, and the well-being of its citizens. It's a stark contrast to the often chaotic and unsanitary conditions that would prevail in many cities for millennia to come. The Indus Valley people weren't just building cities, they were building a remarkably clean and organized way of life. And as the day in this ancient city progresses in your mind's eye, you prepare to delve deeper into how this dedication to order might have shaped other aspects of their surprisingly advanced yet enigmatic world. The afternoon sun beats down on the wide, orderly streets of this Indus city. You've seen the private conveniences, the impressive public works like the Great Bath, but now you start to contemplate the sheer scale of it all. This isn't just a few houses with good plumbing. It's an entire urban ecosystem designed around water management and waste disposal. The foundational mainstream historical fact here is the remarkable grid pattern layout of major Indus cities like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa. Streets were laid out in straight lines, intersecting at near perfect right angles, creating a network of rectangular blocks. This wasn't just for aesthetics or ease of navigation. This geometric precision was intrinsically linked to the sophisticated infrastructure beneath. It allowed for the efficient, straight-line layout of the main drains and the systematic connection of household plumbing to this larger network. Imagine trying to install a complex drainage system in a city that grew organically, with twisting, narrow alleyways. It would be a nightmare. The Indus people, it seems, planned for plumbing from the ground up. You find yourself pondering the workforce required to build and maintain such a system. Who were these ancient civil engineers, these meticulous bricklayers, these tireless drain cleaners? Their work is evident everywhere, yet the individuals remain anonymous, their names lost to time as their script is still undeciphered. You can almost picture specialized crews, their roles perhaps passed down through generations, responsible for specific sections of the city's drains. They would have needed tools, long-handled scrapers perhaps, or specialized hooked implements to clear blockages from the sumps and channels. Archaeologists have found tools, of course, but linking specific ones directly to drain maintenance operative circa 2500 BCE is a bit tricky. It's one of those fascinating, Slightly bizarre details to imagine: the daily grind of an Indus sanitation worker navigating the subterranean network, ensuring the city continued to function smoothly. They were the unseen heroes, their labor essential to the health and comfort of thousands. Maybe they even had a special chant or song they sang while working, the ancient equivalent of a sea shanty, but for sewers. Heave ho, the refuse must flow. This leads to thinking about the social organization that underpinned it all. Such a system doesn't just appear, it requires planning, resource allocation, skilled labor, and ongoing cooperation. Did everyone contribute equally to its upkeep? Was there a sanitation tax? Or were there designated officials, a kind of ancient public works department, overseeing it all? The level of social stratification in Indus cities is a subject of ongoing academic debate. While the cities appear remarkably egalitarian compared to other ancient civilizations, no massive palaces for god kings or vast disparities in housing size in many areas, variations do exist. Some larger houses clearly had more elaborate bathing and toilet facilities. So, did everyone have equal access to the benefits of this advanced sanitation, or were there still degrees of privilege? It's likely that even in these well-planned cities, your address might have influenced the quality of your connection to the main drain. Some things, perhaps, never change. The potential impact on public health must have been significant. By channeling waste away from living areas and providing access to clean water, the Indus people would have drastically reduced the incidence of waterborne diseases that plagued so many other ancient and even not so ancient populations. Cholera, typhoid, dysentery, these would have been far less prevalent, leading to lower infant mortality, longer lifespans, and a generally healthier populace. It's a powerful thought. These boring bricks and drains were in effect a sophisticated public health initiative on a massive scale. They didn't just build cities, they engineered healthier lives. You can imagine the air in Mohenjo-Daro smelling relatively fresh compared to, say, medieval London or Paris. A small mercy, but one that would have made daily life considerably more pleasant. It makes our modern obsession with hand sanitizer seem a bit less revolutionary when you realize these folks were already mastering municipal hygiene thousands of years ago, probably without the benefit of catchy public health jingles. As you continue your mental exploration, you begin to appreciate not just the design, but the sheer quality of the construction. Those kiln-fired bricks you've been noticing, they are remarkably uniform. It's a well-established historical fact that the Indus Valley civilization employed highly standardized brick sizes, typically in a ratio of 1 to 2 to 4, across vast distances and numerous settlements. This wasn't accidental. Standardization meant efficiency in construction, predictability in planning, and likely a more straightforward process for training bricklayers and builders. Imagine a Lego set the size of a city. That's the kind of modular thinking they were employing. These weren't sun-dried mud bricks that would crumble in the first heavy rain. These were baked hard in kilns designed to last. And last they have, for over 4,000 years, a silent testament to their maker's skill. The attention to detail in making these systems work extends to waterproofing. You've seen the bitumen lining the Great Bath, but even in smaller household drains or bathing platforms, there's evidence of careful sealing. They used gypsum-based mortars, and some surfaces appear to have been treated with a kind of plaster or clay slip that would have made them more water resistant. It's these little things, this consistent focus on quality and functionality, that elevate their sanitation systems from merely adequate to truly exceptional for their time. One slightly more obscure or bizarre detail is the occasional discovery of terracotta drain pipes that were shaped or joined in ways to minimize leakage, almost like ancient efforts at creating gaskets or sealed joints. They were clearly thinking about the long-term integrity of the system. They weren't just building for today, they were building for tomorrow, and perhaps for generations to come. It makes you wonder if they had building inspectors, stern-faced officials tapping a brick here and there, ensuring it met the Indus standard. Probably not, but the quality implies a strong shared understanding of best practices. What's striking is the contrast between this incredible civic infrastructure and the apparent lack of grandiose individual monuments. Unlike ancient Egypt with its pyramids, or Mesopotamia with its towering ziggurats and palaces dedicated to powerful rulers, the Indus cities are notable for their relative absence of such structures. The grandest things they built seem to have been for public benefit or communal use. The great bath, the granaries, and this vast, intricate network of drains and wells. It suggests a different kind of societal focus, perhaps less on glorifying individuals and more on the collective good, on creating a functional and livable environment for the populace. It's a quiet sort of monumentality, one embedded in the very fabric of daily life. Their legacy isn't a giant stone face, it's the ghost of clean water and functioning sewers. This communal aspect makes you wonder about other rituals or social customs related to water and cleanliness, beyond what the Great Bath might suggest. Were there particular times of day for bathing? Were certain sources of water considered purer than others? Did households have their own small rituals for, say, drawing the first water of the morning, or for cleaning their private bathing areas? The Indus script remains undeciphered, a tantalizing mystery that holds the key to so many of these questions. Without written records detailing their beliefs, archaeologists and historians are left to interpret the material culture. This leads to ongoing academic debate about the nature of Indus religion and ritual. While figures on seals and certain artifacts hint at deities or spiritual beliefs, the exact practices, especially as they might relate to everyday cleanliness or the symbolic meaning of water in different contexts, are largely speculative. Were their meticulous sanitation practices driven purely by practicality, or were they interwoven with a complex system of beliefs about purity, order, and the sacredness of water? Perhaps the very act of maintaining the city's cleanliness was a form of collective ritual, a way of upholding cosmic order. It's a far cry from just grumbling about whose turn it is to take out the trash. This might have been civic duty elevated to a spiritual plane. It makes you think that if they ever invent time travel tourism, an Indus city would be fascinating, but you definitely want to read the local customs and hygiene etiquette pamphlet very carefully. One wrong move with the water pitcher, and you might cause an intertemporal incident. Your thoughts drift from the flowing water within the drains to what happened after it. The sumps and catch pits within the drainage system were designed to collect solid waste, as you've noted. But then what? This material didn't just magically disappear. It had to be manually removed and disposed of somewhere. This points to another layer of their organized civic life, a system for solid waste management. Indeed, a mainstream historical fact is that archaeologists have found evidence of rubbish bins or designated dumping areas on the outskirts of some Indus cities, or in specific, less trafficked parts of the urban landscape. Some houses even had rubbish chutes that led to collection bins on the street. So not only were they channeling away wastewater, but they were also systematically collecting and dealing with their solid trash. Imagine the scene: municipal workers, another essential, if unglamorous profession, regularly emptying the sumps from the drains and collecting household refuse. What did they do with it? So some was likely used as landfill in certain areas, or perhaps transported further away from the city. It's another logistical puzzle that they evidently solved with a degree of efficiency. You can almost picture the ancient equivalent of a garbage truck, probably a sturdy cart pulled by oxen, making its rounds. It's this attention to the entire life cycle of waste that is so impressive. They weren't just kicking the can down the road, or rather, the refuse down the drain without a plan. They were thinking it through. Sometimes, these ancient refuse heaps become treasure troves for archaeologists. A rather interesting, if not entirely bizarre, detail is what can be learned from the broken pottery, discarded tools, animal bones, and other detritus found in these middens. For example, the prevalence of certain types of pottery shards can indicate trade connections or shifts in manufacturing styles. Discarded terracotta figurines might offer clues about popular beliefs or children's toys. Even ancient seeds or pollen preserved in these waste areas can tell us about their diet and the local environment. It's like sifting through the city's diary, one piece of ancient trash at a time. Every broken pot tells a story, and sometimes the garbage tells you more about daily life than a pristine monument ever could. This sophisticated waste management makes you consider their relationship with the broader environment. The Indus River and its tributaries were the lifeblood of this civilization, providing water for agriculture, drinking, and of course, for flushing those remarkable drains. But did their large urban populations, even with their advanced sanitation, have a significant environmental impact? This is a complex question that historians and environmental archaeologists continue to debate. While their systems were designed to manage waste within the cities, the ultimate fate of the wastewater, likely discharged into surrounding agricultural fields or eventually back into the river system downstream, would have had consequences. Were they aware of concepts like water pollution in the way we understand it today? Probably not in the same terms. However, their efforts to channel waste and keep their immediate living environment clean suggest a desire to live in harmony with their surroundings, or at least to mitigate the worst effects of dense urban living. When you compare the Indus Valley cities to some of their contemporaries, their achievements in sanitation become even more striking. In many other parts of the ancient world, waste was often simply thrown into the streets or into open pits within settlements, leading to unsanitary conditions and the rapid spread of disease. While civilizations like the Romans would later become famous for their aqueducts and baths, the Indus people were implementing widespread, integrated urban sanitation systems much earlier, and with a focus on household-level access that was quite unique. It wasn't just about grand public displays. It was about everyday livability. You have to wonder if travelers from other, less hygienically advanced regions arrived in Mohenjo-Daro and were just absolutely stunned by the cleanliness. You mean you don't just throw your garbage out the window here? Remarkable. It must have seemed like a different world. The Indus people weren't just building functional cities, they were crafting environments that, by ancient standards, were exceptionally clean and orderly, fostering a quality of life that few others could match. The meticulous order of the Indus cities, particularly their sanitation systems, is undeniably impressive. But as you wander these phantom streets, a question forms in your mind. What were the broader social implications of such a highly organized, rule-bound society? Did this love of order extend to all aspects of life, potentially creating a rigid social structure? The uniformity in brick size, the grid-patterned streets, the standardized weights and measures they used, it all points to a high degree of central planning, or, at the very least, a powerful shared consensus. Was this a society that valued conformity over individuality? It's hard to say without their voices, their written stories. But the efficiency of their public works suggests a population willing to cooperate, to adhere to communal standards for the greater good. Perhaps their version of a rebellious teenager was someone who sorted their trash into the wrong designated clay pot, a shocking display of civic disobedience. This leads you to contemplate the eventual fate of these magnificent cities. It's a mainstream historical fact that around 1900 BCE, after centuries of flourishing, the Indus Valley civilization began to decline. Cities were gradually abandoned, and the sophisticated urban culture faded. The reasons for this decline are complex and still heavily debated by scholars. Was it climate change, shifting river courses drying up vital water sources? Was it resource depletion, the strain of large populations on the local environment? Did internal social unrest or a breakdown of their intricate trade networks play a part? Or perhaps, ironically, did the very systems designed to support healthy urban life eventually falter? Imagine the strain on these advanced sanitation systems if the water supply became erratic due to prolonged drought, or if the population dwindled, leaving too few people to maintain the complex network of drains and sumps. A breakdown in sanitation could lead to an increase in disease, further weakening the society and accelerating its decline. It's a sobering thought. Even the most advanced systems are vulnerable when the foundations upon which they are built, be it environmental stability or social cohesion, begin to crumble. Some researchers have looked for evidence of system failure in the later periods of occupation, such as drains becoming clogged or falling into disrepair. The academic debate about the precise cocktail of factors that led to the Indus civilization's eventual transformation from an urban to a more rural society is intense, and the state of their boring but essential infrastructure likely played a crucial role, whether as a symptom or a contributing cause. Amidst the grand scale of the drains and public baths, sometimes smaller, more personal artifacts offer intriguing glimpses. A rather specific, perhaps even bizarre detail that occasionally comes to light from archaeological digs are small, finely made tools of bone or ivory, or carefully shaped pottery items whose exact purpose is unknown, but which some speculate might have been used for personal hygiene. perhaps for cleaning teeth, applying cosmetics, or even for some unknown medical or grooming practice. Residues found on certain pottery vessels also hint at the use of various plants, some of which might have had medicinal or cleansing properties. These subtle clues suggest that their concern for cleanliness and well being wasn't just about large scale engineering, but extended to individual practices. What truly resonates as you stand in the heart of this imagined ancient metropolis is the sheer ingenuity and problem solving prowess of the Indus people. Without modern science, without advanced computational tools, they observed their environment, understood basic principles of hydraulics and engineering, and applied them to create remarkably livable cities. They saw a problem: how to provide clean water and remove waste for a large population, and they engineered elegant, sustainable solutions using the materials at hand. They didn't just cope, they innovated. It makes you appreciate the human capacity for creative thinking, especially when faced with fundamental challenges. They were, in their own quiet, brick by brick way, profoundly intelligent. As the shadows lengthen in your imagined Indus city, you start to feel the weight of its mysteries. The undeciphered script hovers like an unspoken question, holding so many secrets about their beliefs, their governance, their daily lives, and perhaps even the reasons for their eventual departure from these urban centers. Their commitment to order and cleanliness is a tangible legacy, but the inner world that drove it remains tantalizingly out of reach. The silence of these ruins is profound, broken only by the whisper of the wind, which seems to carry faint echoes of a highly organized, surprisingly advanced, and ultimately enigmatic civilization. Their story is a compelling reminder that advanced isn't just about flashy monuments or powerful armies. Sometimes it's about the quiet brilliance of a well-drained street. The sun begins to dip towards the horizon in your imagined Indus city, painting the baked brick walls in hues of orange and purple. The bustle of the day, even in its ghostly form, starts to subside. You find yourself reflecting on what happened after the people left, after the drains silted up for the last time, after the streets fell silent. Did all this knowledge, this incredible expertise in sanitation and urban planning, simply vanish? It's a mainstream historical fact that as the great Indus cities declined, populations dispersed, often moving to smaller settlements or migrating eastward. While the grand urban experiment faded, it's believed that some Harappan traits, technologies, and possibly even cultural ideas were carried on, absorbed, and transformed by later cultures that rose in the Indian subcontinent. Think about the deep-rooted traditions of ritual purity and the importance of water in later Indian religions. While direct, unbroken lineages are incredibly hard to trace without textual evidence, it's tempting to see echoes of the Indus people's meticulous concern for cleanliness and their reverence for water in these subsequent cultural flowerings. Could the bathing rituals that became so central to Hinduism, for example, have distant ancient roots in places like the Great Bath of Mohenjo-Daro, or in the daily ablutions performed in countless Harappan homes? This is, of course, a subject of intense academic debate, the extent of continuity between the Indus Valley civilization and later Vedic or classical Indian culture. Some scholars argue for significant links, pointing to iconographic similarities on seals or the persistence of certain craft traditions. Others urge caution, emphasizing the disruptions and transformations that occurred. The silence of their undeciphered script is particularly poignant here. If we could read their words, we might understand the philosophy or the religious beliefs that underpinned their extraordinary commitment to sanitation. Was it a divine mandate, a set of hygiene laws handed down by wise rulers, or a practical secular understanding of public health? Without their voices, we see the what, the impressive drains, the wells, the baths. But the why remains largely a matter of inference and educated guesswork. It's like admiring a beautiful, complex machine without the instruction manual. You can see it works, you can marvel at its design, but you can't fully grasp the intent of its creators. It's also fascinating to contrast their advanced sanitation with what seems to be a relative lack of other things common to great ancient empires. Where are the massive fortifications suggesting constant warfare, like those in Mycenaean Greece? Where is the monumental art glorifying rulers and conquests like that of the Assyrians or Egyptians? The Indus cities seem by comparison remarkably peaceful and utilitarian. Their greatest public works were not for war or for the ego of a king, but for the everyday well-being of their citizens. It's a different kind of power, a different definition of advanced. Perhaps they invested their societal energy and resources into drains rather than into dynastic disputes or displays of military might. It's a rather comforting thought, isn't it? A civilization that prioritized a good sewage system over a bigger pile of weapons. Maybe they were onto something. Their legacy is not one of conquest, but of quiet, clean, and orderly existence, a model of sustainable urban living that in some ways we are still striving to achieve today. As the last light of your imagined day fades over the ancient city, you're left with a profound sense of respect for these distant ancestors. Their world, so meticulously ordered and surprisingly clean, offers more than just a curious glimpse into the past. It offers lessons that resonate even now. In an age where sustainable urban living and effective water management are critical global challenges, the Indus people remind us that these are not new problems, and that ingenious solutions can be found even with simpler technologies. Their focus on communal well-being, on planning for the long term, and on creating an environment that supported public health feels incredibly modern. It makes you wonder what an Indus city planner would think of our sprawling metropolises with their often strained infrastructure. They'd probably ask to see our drainage schematics and then shake their heads quietly. Walking these boring but brilliant streets, even in your mind, is a humbling experience. It's a stark reminder that history isn't just about kings and battles. It's about the everyday lives of ordinary people and the systems they create to make those lives better. The true marvel of the Indus Valley civilization isn't hidden in a treasure chest. It's in the very layout of their cities, in the silent eloquence of their brick-lined drains, and in their commitment to a clean and orderly existence. It's a history you can almost feel under your feet, a foundational layer of human ingenuity. It's worth remembering that these sophisticated cities lay hidden, their achievements largely forgotten, for millennia. It was only in the 1920s that their true extent and complexity began to be rediscovered, a mainstream historical fact that rewrote the early history of South Asia. Imagine the astonishment of those early archaeologists as they unearthed not primitive villages, but vast, well planned urban centers with sanitation systems that would have been the envy of many later civilizations. It was like finding a lost chapter of human history, one that spoke of a society with a unique approach to urban life. Of course, with any ancient civilization, especially one whose script remains undeciphered, misconceptions can arise. A somewhat bizarre modern interpretation you might occasionally encounter is the romanticized notion of the Indus Valley as a utopian society, perfectly egalitarian and living in complete harmony with nature, their sanitation systems being proof of their enlightened state. While their achievements were remarkable, and they do appear less overtly hierarchical than some contemporaries, it's important to avoid projecting our own ideals onto them. They were human beings, facing real-world challenges, and their society, like any other, would have had its own complexities, tensions, and imperfections. Their drains were good, but probably not magically good. The quest to understand them fully continues, and a huge part of that hinges on the academic efforts to decipher the Indus script. Imagine what those enigmatic symbols, found on thousands of small seals and pottery fragments, could tell us. Would they reveal the names of their leaders, the tenets of their religion, the laws that governed their well-ordered cities? Would we find detailed records of their public works, manuals for drain maintenance, or even philosophical treatises on the importance of cleanliness? The ongoing attempts to crack this linguistic code using computational analysis, comparative linguistics, and careful study of the contexts in which the script appears are a source of constant academic debate and excitement. Each new theory, each potential breakthrough, offers a tantalizing glimpse of hope that one day these silent cities will speak to us more directly. For now, their sanitation systems, their orderly streets, and their enigmatic symbols stand as a testament to a people who, over 4,000 years ago, achieved a remarkable level of civic sophistication. They remind us that the foundations of a healthy society are often built on things we take for granted: clean water, effective waste disposal, and a shared commitment to the common good. As you prepare to leave this ancient world behind, you carry with you a sense of wonder at their ingenuity, a respect for their quiet achievements, and a lingering curiosity about the many secrets they still hold. And now, let the image of those ancient, sun-baked bricks begin to soften. Let the straight lines of the Indus streets gently blur, and the intricate patterns of their drains fade into the quiet of your mind. The hum of that distant, orderly city grows fainter and fainter, replaced by the stillness of your own comfortable space. Feel the weight of history lift, leaving only a sense of calm and peace. There are no more mysteries to solve, no more ancient systems to ponder, just the gentle rhythm of your own breathing, slow and deep. Inhale a sense of tranquility, and exhale any lingering thoughts or concerns from your day. Allow your body to grow heavy, to sink comfortably into the support beneath you. The ingenuity of the Indus people, their quiet dedication to order and cleanliness, now becomes a distant, soothing echo, a reminder of the enduring human capacity for care and forethought. Each breath out is a gentle release, carrying you further from the complexities of the ancient past and deeper into the serene present. The baked earth, the flowing water, the meticulously laid bricks, All these details can dissolve now into a soft, warm sensation of relaxation. Your mind is clear as the fresh water that once flowed through those ancient wells. There is nothing to do, nowhere to be, except right here resting peacefully. Allow any remaining thoughts to drift away like leaves on a slow-moving stream, effortlessly carried out of sight. You are surrounded by quiet, by comfort, and by a profound sense of ease. The journey into the past is complete, and now only rest remains. Good night.